All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something I know you're all about: lifelong learning. You sent us this amazing interview, super insightful, with Yasser Al-Huzaimi. He's a training and development expert from the CourseUnity YouTube channel. And I have to say, I'm pumped to dig in. Are we ever really done learning? Like, is formal education the only path? What are some of the biggest, I don't know, curveballs the training world is facing these days? Let's find out. One thing that really stuck with me was Al-Hazimi's story, the one about the dancing chicks. Can't wait to unpack that with you.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's a good one. That is. Really makes you
Yes.
think about how we learn, like what to look for in those sources of knowledge.
Yes. Okay, so Al-Hazimi, he really digs into this idea, this core argument that learning should be, a lifelong thing. And he uses that analogy, it's really cool, about three cups to show kind of like the roadblocks people hit, you know?
The three cups, yeah. You get the overturned cup, that's arrogance, right? Then there's the full cup, that's like complacency. And then, whoa, the person with no cup at all. That's embodying folks who think, I can't learn, period. It's, I think he's onto something here, you know? These are mindsets we've all probably run into them, maybe even in ourselves.
Totally. Thinking about these cups, has me thinking, have you ever felt like your own learning, like it got, I don't know, stalled out because of one of those mindsets? Maybe feeling like, I got this, I know it all, or I just can't wrap my head around this.
Oh, definitely, yeah. We all grapple with these mental blocks, right, from time to time.
Mhm.
I know I've been there feeling that way before, taking the plunge into something new. But the key is recognizing those feelings and just pushing past them, past those feelings.
I'm with you there. And Al-Hazimi, he's great. He doesn't just point out these roadblocks, he gives us ways to overcome them. He's saying that acknowledging our capacity for growth, that's crucial no matter your age or experience. It's like we're giving ourselves permission to be, lifelong learners. What are your thoughts on that?
Spot on, totally spot on. That first step, the acknowledgement,
Mm-hmm.
right? Acknowledging that we can grow, that's essential
Yeah.
for both personal and professional development. Especially these days when everything's changing so fast.
It's like saying, hey, it's cool to not know it all, and even better to be open to learning something new.
Exactly. And speaking of learning, Al-Hazimi, he breaks down different sources of knowledge, different ways to learn, and it's fascinating. He talks about the usual suspects, books and courses, but he's also a big fan of experiential learning, like learning from the pros, mentors, even folks who've messed up, tapping into, that wisdom you get from real-world experience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do you think?
Absolutely. He's all about that well-rounded learning diet, I guess you could call it. But there are so many sources out there. How do we even know what to trust anymore?
Oh, that's the million-dollar question, right? And that's where that story comes in, the one about those dancing chicks, remember. It's a reminder to not just, accept everything we see.
Hmm.
Those chicks, they weren't dancing. They were reacting to a hot plate.
It's so vivid. To me, it really highlights, that we need critical thinking now more than ever with all this information overload, right?
Right.
Got to filter through all the noise to get to the good stuff.
Couldn't agree more. It's about developing that healthy skepticism, seeking out personal validation. It's less about just taking things at face value and more about testing, experimenting, and seeing if those things actually work in our own lives.
I love that. Being a knowledge detective. Always questioning, always investigating. Which brings us to Al-Hazimi's take on the whole training world. He's pretty upfront about how, training, it's often presented as this like instant fix for all these organizational problems, but it rarely works that way, right?
Right. It's like thinking a Band-Aid can heal a broken bone, You've got to have the right solution for the right problem. And he makes that really clear, the difference between what training can solve and what it can't.
And he doesn't shy away from those tough stats either. He brings up that only 4% of people fully apply what they learn in training. Man, that number really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It just highlights that training on its own, it's not enough. You need the right environment, support, and a real commitment to actually using the knowledge, putting it into practice. Al-Hazimi even dives into the different management styles, how those impact training effectiveness, from the managers who are all about learning to the ones who just aren't.
Oh, I've been there. A manager who champions learning, that makes all the difference. What about you? Have you seen that impact, in your own work? How much do you think, like, the effectiveness of training depends on the organization's, I don't know, culture?
I think it's make or break, to be honest. It's like planting a seed, you know, fertile ground versus rocky soil.
Mm.
A supportive culture, that can make or break the whole thing, any training program. But it goes beyond just the manager, right? The whole organization needs to be on board, needs to embrace that culture of learning.
I think you're right, yeah. It's got to be an environment where people, they feel, I don't know, encouraged to learn, encouraged to grow, and we're actually using that new knowledge is celebrated, rewarded even.
Right on. It's about making learning a process, a continuous thing, not just a one-time event.
And speaking of process, let's talk about the different formats. You know, you
Yeah.
mentioned Al-Hazimi. He touches on online versus in-person training, and I know that's something you're interested in, especially that efficiency aspect. So what does he say about that?
He acknowledges the good and the bad, the pros and cons of both approaches. Online learning, it's all about flexibility, accessibility, which is fantastic for building a foundation, getting that knowledge base going. But to really master complex skills, in-person training might still have the upper hand.
So he's not like dismissing either one,
Yeah.
right? He's saying choose the right one based on, I don't know, your goals, where you want to be at that mastery level.
Exactly. And it's wild how tech is like blurring the lines between the two. Online learning is getting more and more interactive,
Yeah.
personalized,
Yeah.
while in-person is bringing in more tech-driven elements.
It's like we're heading towards this like hybrid model, which could be really, really cool. Al-Hazimi, he actually breaks down skill development into four levels. Absence, deficiency, adequacy, and proficiency. It helps us understand where we are in our, learning journey, our learning path, and which format, which way to learn might work best for us. I think it's really, really helpful.
I agree, yeah. It's a clear roadmap,
Yeah.
Think about it for you. If you're starting out in something brand new, online learning, that's your way to dip your toes in, get the basics down. But to move up, to progress, you might need a mentor, maybe some hands-on workshops to hit those higher levels.
Solid advice no matter what field you're in.
Totally. It's about recognizing that different stages of learning, different stages need different approaches.
And about challenging ourselves, pushing past those comfort zones, going after those opportunities for growth.
You got it. And sometimes that growth, that means facing some hard truths, some uncomfortable stuff. And Al-Hazimi brings up something big that we need to talk about more: the lack of original Arabic content in training and development.
That's a really good point. It speaks to these, these bigger issues of representation, of access to knowledge. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Al-Hazimi, he attributes this partly to a disconnect between the academic world, where a lot of this content comes from, and what's actually happening in the workplace, the demands of work. We need to bridge this gap, and I think that starts with more collaboration, more working together between academics, the practitioners, and the experts, the industry experts.
It's about bringing all those viewpoints, those different viewpoints together, making sure that the knowledge that's created is relevant, that it's accessible to the folks who need it most.
Absolutely, yeah. It's about making sure those valuable insights, those golden nuggets, they reach a wider audience.
That's a fantastic point, and it emphasizes how important diversity is when it comes to, creating and sharing knowledge. Wow, this conversation has given me so much to think about.
Me too, me too. And
Cool.
we've only just scratched the surface. I'm really excited to dig deeper into some of Al-Hazimi's other ideas.
Okay, so next up, we're going to explore his take on gamification, the future of training. Buckle up, it's going to be fun.
Gamification. It's really cool, and Al-Hazimi has some really, really neat ideas about how to, spice things up, make learning more, more fun, more engaging.
I know you love finding like those outside the box ways to learn, so what do you think? Does playing games have a place in, serious learning?
Oh yeah, totally. I think games, they can really change how we learn, especially for the younger folks who are already so used to interactive stuff.
Al-Hazimi, he actually breaks down like the differences between, exercises, activities, and straight up games. He points out how each one, it caters to different learning styles. You can use them strategically to help the whole learning process.
It's not just about like throwing a game into the mix,
Yeah.
right? It's got to be well thought out, intentional. He talks about finding that sweet spot where learning is actually fun and impactful. You need the fun, yeah, but you also need the substance.
It's like that whole edutainment thing, right? Finding that balance, education and entertainment. He actually lays out 4 types of learning experiences. Some are fun and full of knowledge. Others, well, not so much.
Yeah. You want to avoid those extremes, right? Hit
Uh-huh.
that middle ground where you're hooked, you're engaged, and you're picking up something valuable.
I see, I see. I'm starting to see how gamification could be really, really powerful, especially for those topics that are, I don't know, usually seen as kind of boring. It's about tapping into that natural human thing, that wanting to play and explore.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just being engaged. Al-Hazimi, he believes that gamification, it can also build good attitudes, good values, along with the knowledge and skills, you know.
Yeah.
Imagine learning teamwork, problem solving, resilience, all through like a well-designed game.
Wow, that's awesome. It's like sneaking in those essential life skills while people are having a blast.
Exactly. It's a win-win situation. But let's not forget, gamification is just one piece of the puzzle. There's a lot more to uncover in Al-Azimi's work.
You're right, you're right. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about something a bit more personal, self-development. I know you're curious about, how legit this whole field is, and Al-Hazimi, he definitely has some thoughts, some strong opinions about it.
He's definitely not holding back. He acknowledges, that self-development, it's a real thing, a valid area of study, but he's not afraid to call out how it gets twisted, especially when it gets all like overly spiritual, focused on energy and stuff.
He seems to be pushing for, I don't know, a more grounded approach, a more practical approach to self-improvement.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not saying mental, emotional well-being aren't important or having good people skills, but he's basically telling us to be smarter about it, to be more careful about the self-development stuff we consume.
So it's about thinking critically, not just blindly following whatever we hear or read.
Right. It's about looking at the source,
Yeah.
looking for evidence and really asking ourselves, does this fit with my values, my goals?
That's such good advice, no matter what you're learning about. It's about having that healthy skepticism, like we were talking about before.
Absolutely. And speaking of approaching things with a critical eye, Al-Hazimi also gets into the whole manager-employee dynamic. I know that's something you're keen on, making those relationships better.
Oh, totally. Workplace relationships, man, they can be so tricky. I'm
Yeah.
always looking for ways to navigate them better. What does Al Hazimi have to say?
He presents this really cool framework, five positions a manager should take with their employees: standing in front, standing against, standing behind, standing beside, and standing apart.
Whoa, those are some interesting positions. Can you break those down for us?
Sure, standing in front, that's all about leadership, being protective, taking charge. It's setting the direction, being the advocate for the team.
So it's like being the shield, taking on the tough stuff, protecting the team from all the outside pressures.
Exactly. Then you've got standing against, which sounds, I don't know, confrontational maybe, but it's really about setting those boundaries.
Yeah.
Holding people accountable.
It's about having the guts to say no sometimes, even when it's tough, to protect the team's values, their goals.
Exactly. Then there's standing behind, which is all about support, encouragement, being there for your team, offering guidance, helping them through the tough time.
Well, like being the wind beneath their wings, helping them soar.
I like that.
Yeah.
Next, we have standing beside, and that's all about collaboration, being partners, working with your team, being part of the whole thing, celebrating the wins together.
It's about getting in there, getting your hands dirty, not just, barking orders from a distance.
Right. And then the last one, standing apart. This one might seem a little odd, but it's about giving the team space to grow on their own, to make their own choices, develop those leadership skills.
So it's about trusting them to do their best, letting them shine without constantly looking over their shoulder.
You got it. It's about knowing when to step back
Yeah.
and let the team take ownership.
I love this framework. It's so insightful. It really shows all the different hats, a manager has to wear to be effective.
It really does, yeah. It's a great tool,
Yeah.
for thinking about our own leadership styles, thinking about how we can better support the people we work with.
Even if you're not a manager, I think understanding this stuff, it can help you navigate, any workplace relationship.
Oh, for sure. It's about understanding how people interact, how they support each other.
And speaking of support, Al-Hazimi, he gives some great advice for, the new grads, the folks just starting out in the workforce. You're interested in this, right?
Totally, totally. Starting your career, it can be exciting and a little scary at the same time. What wisdom does he have to share?
He emphasizes that learning, it doesn't stop after school. You got to keep going, keep learning. It's about having a growth mindset and actively looking for those chances, those opportunities to pick up new skills, you know?
He also he also tells new grads to think about volunteering,
Yeah.
as a way to get experience, to build their networks. It's about being proactive, taking the initiative, even if it means, starting small.
He's real about it. He doesn't sugarcoat it. Rejection is part of the journey. You got to develop that resilience, learn from those setbacks.
He even uses this analogy. It's about a spring. The more you compress it, the higher it bounces back.
I love that visual. It's so powerful. It's like those challenges, they can actually make us stronger,
Okay.
more capable.
And he reminds us that success, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes consistent effort, hard work, and a willingness to keep learning, keep growing.
Such an important message for anyone starting out.
It really is. It's about the long game, you know, not getting discouraged by those little bumps in the road.
I think Al-Hazimi's advice, it applies to everyone no matter where you are in your career. It's a good reminder that learning and growth, they're lifelong things.
Couldn't agree more. It's about always pushing ourselves, pushing past those comfort zones.
So, are you ready for another one of Al-Hazimi's his big ideas?
Hit me with it. What's next on our lifelong learning adventure?
Let's talk about something that people are often a little skeptical about: gamification. Al-Hazimi is all about bringing in those elements of, play, of fun into learning.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, it sounds kind of strange, right? Using games to learn.
It might, but Al-Hazimi makes a really good case for why games, they can be powerful tools for learning. Think about it. Games, they grab your attention, they're challenging, they motivate you, and they give you instant feedback.
I see, I see. But how do we apply that to, real learning environments?
He talks about finding that sweet spot, that balance between, keeping it fun and making sure it's got substance. He outlines 4 types of learning experiences, and the goal is to hit that perfect spot where learning is both fun and effective.
So it's not just about, slapping a game onto a lesson plan.
Yeah.
It's got to be intentional, well-designed, right?
Right.
To be both fun and educational.
Yes, and Al-Hazimi, he also stresses how important it is to make sure those games, they match up with your learning goals and that they cater to different learning styles.
He also talks about bringing in competition, collaboration, to
Yep.
keep people engaged, to keep them motivated.
It's about tapping into that natural human drive, to connect, to compete, to achieve.
Okay, I get it. So how do we actually, create these gamified learning experiences?
It starts with understanding your learners. What are they interested in? What do they need? What motivates them?
And being open to experimenting, trying new things, and making changes based on the feedback you get.
Exactly. It's about finding what works best for that specific situation, those specific learners.
I'm starting to see the potential here, making learning more fun, more engaging. That can lead to much better results in the end.
Totally. All right, ready to switch gears again.
Let's do it. What other nuggets of wisdom does Al-Azimi have for us?
Let's explore his thoughts on self-development. I know you're curious about how valid this whole field is, and Al-Hazimi, he's got some pretty strong opinions on it.
He definitely doesn't hold back, does he?
Hmm.
He acknowledges that self-development, it is a legitimate area of study, but he's not afraid to point out how it can be, misrepresented, especially when it gets all like overly spiritual, overly focused on energy and those kinds of things.
It sounds like he's pushing for a more, I don't know, a more down-to-earth approach, a more practical approach to self-improvement.
He is. He is. He's not saying that mental and emotional well-being are unimportant or that, strong interpersonal skills don't matter, but he's basically saying, hey, be smart about this. Be careful about the self-development stuff you're consuming.
So it's about being critical, being a critical thinker, not just accepting everything you hear or read.
Right. It's about, looking at the source, looking for evidence, looking for approaches that are actually based on something real, and then asking yourself, does this fit with my values? Does this fit with my goals?
That's great advice no matter what you're trying to learn. It's about that healthy skepticism, like we were talking about earlier.
Totally. It's about taking ownership of your learning,
Hmm.
making good decisions, informed decisions.
Al-Hazimi also reminds us that self-development, it's not a destination, it's a journey. It's a process, of constant growth, constant improvement.
Yeah, it's about making small changes, sustainable changes
Mm.
over time, rather than trying to change like everything about yourself overnight.
That's a good reminder, a really good reminder. It's about progress, not perfection.
Right on. It's about embracing the journey, you
Mhm.
know, celebrating those little wins along the way.
Speaking of celebrating wins, it's about time for us to wrap up this deep dive. What are some of the key takeaways, the big things you've gotten from Al-Hazimi so far?
His perspective, it's made me think about learning in a whole new way. It's not just about gathering information, it's about growing,
Mm.
personally, professionally, becoming better people, building relationships, creating a more fulfilling life.
It's about being proactive, looking for opportunities to grow, to learn, and never, ever stopping exploring new possibilities.
Nicely put.
Uh,
It's about embracing that lifelong pursuit of learning, always growing, always developing.
So as we head into the final part of this deep dive, I want to leave you with this question. What's one specific thing you want to get better at? Could be personal, could be professional. And what's one concrete step you can take, like today, to get a little bit closer to that goal?
It's about, making that choice, being intentional, making learning a part of your routine, part of your life.
Yes, love that. So we're wrapping up our deep dive into lifelong learning with Yasser Al-Hazimi, and let's shift gears one more time. He talks about this really interesting change happening in training and development, like a whole generational shift in how we approach it.
He does. He talks
Yeah.
about going from I think he calls it a motivational
Hmm.
generation, all about getting people pumped up, excited about change, to a more, conceptual generation, one that wants to understand the why,
Hmm. But even knowing the why, it wasn't enough, was it? He says people started wanting practical stuff, tools they could use, like a tools generation. They wanted frameworks, techniques they could actually put into practice.
Totally. It's like we went from pep talks, rah-rah speeches to deep dives into theory, and now it's all about hands-on stuff, workshops, learning skills you can actually use.
Yeah, exactly. But he doesn't stop there. Al-Hazimi says the next generation of training, of development, it's going to be even more focused on like feedback, on evaluation.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about giving information, it's about measuring, seeing if it's actually working, making changes based on the data, making sure it's doing what it's supposed to do.
It's that constant loop, learning and improving, not just for the person learning, but for the whole training process itself.
That's a really good point. It shows how the field is becoming more data-driven, focused on results.
And it really highlights how learning, it's a team effort, it's ongoing.
Mhm.
Al-Hazimi, his insights have been, I don't know, what do you think? Invaluable.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
He's made us rethink learning,
Yeah.
made us realize how important it is personally and professionally.
He's reminded us that learning, it's not just about stuffing our heads with facts. It's about changing ourselves, changing how we see things, becoming more, I don't know, more adaptable, more resilient, especially in a world that's constantly changing, right?
So I couldn't said it better myself.
So before we wrap up, let's bring it back to you, the listener. What's one thing, one area, personally or professionally, where you want to grow?
Yeah.
And what's one thing, one tiny step you can take today, right now, to get a little closer to that?
It's about taking ownership, taking action.
It is. It doesn't have to be this huge thing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's reading an article, taking an online course, or even just chatting with someone who sees things differently than you do. Keep that learning going. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into lifelong learning.